everyone. My name is Melly Santora. I am an April board member and I will be moderating our time together today. So thank you for joining the workshop, which is entitled, What is a SILC and Why Should I Care? I'd like to mention a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, when you scroll over the screen, a menu bar pops up. Depending on what device you're using, you can find the menu bar at the top or the bottom of the screen. That's where you'll find closed captioning for today's session. And you can view the captioning by selecting the CC tab on the menu bar. For sign language interpreting, you can find the lovely Madeline on screen. If you'd like to change the size of the screen when slides are shown, you can scroll kind of back and forth to make the interpreter larger or smaller. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat feature. You can find the word bubble in the same menu bar. If you'd like to turn the chat feature off, if you're using a screen reader, you can do that by pressing Alt and H, or please use the info and help section on the conference website for more help. For Q&A times, please note that the Q&A box is in the menu bar. Please only submit questions there as they may get lost in the chat. To ask a question or make a comment, you can also use the hand option on the menu bar. That allows us to know that you have a question. For those of you on the phone or using keystrokes, please press *9 or Alt and Y on your keypad to raise your hand. We will then let you know when you can unmute, and you can also use Alt and A if you're using keystrokes. Remember, if you wish to join the conversation, please try to minimize the background noise so that we can hear you clearly. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tyler, who will get us started off today. Tyler, take it away.
Thank you, Melly. Hey, everyone. I'm Tyler Wilcox. I work for the Independent Living Council of Wisconsin. And I'd like to ask Dr. Francie Anderson to introduce herself as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Francie Anderson, and I'm the Executive Director for the Arkansas SILC.
So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what a SILC is. This is kind of basic and kind of the background behind why I even thought about this whole thing was I've been in my job for about a year. I worked at an independent living center as an IL counselor and an assistant director of IL and eventually the director of IL before hopping over to the SILC. I'll be honest, I had no idea what a SILC was. I knew there was a SILC. I knew there was a spill. I had no idea how it involved me. I didn't know why it should even matter. It was this vague thing that was happening in Madison, and I always kind of wanted to be a part of it, but I didn't really quite understand it. And I'm hoping to kind of smooth some of that out. So there are some folks here I see who work in SILCs. This is going to be a lot of I hope this is going to be a lot of information you know already, but you can holler at me if I say something wrong. Anyone else, this is kind of a way to get started thinking about these because, you know, SILCs are kind of important. SILs are as well. The whole thing is important, but this is kind of about us and who we are and what we do. So the first thing is, you know, you've heard this word SILC. It has nothing to do with this. This is slide 2. Those of you can't see, on the left is a picture of a bunch of moths in cocoons. On the right is skeins of silk cloth that has been made. Has nothing to do with the bombyx mori or mulberries or silkworms. It actually stands for Statewide Independent Living Council. So the thing that's really important is this council bit. Council members are appointed by the governor. SILCs work, partner and collaborate with other boards, councils, and commissions. So we're not just kind of working by ourselves, we're working with other groups and other councils and other kind of agencies that do all this kind of behind the scenes work. And we're also very frequently in contact with state and federal government entities because we are kind of always looking out for the SILs and what's going on in the state. And I think Dr. Anderson wanted to add a little bit to this as well.
Thank you, Tyler, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this very casual conversation. You know, being on the SILC board is not just, oh, I'm appointed by the governor. The executive directors of SILCs need their board members to be engaged. And sometimes that engagement involves, you know, you can't be on calls, 3 calls at once to be effective, right? So that's where you empower, as the SILC's director can empower board members to be on those calls, be a listener, be a listening ear. And oftentimes just invite them anyway to those meetings. Don't take it on yourself. And then some of the centers, you got center reps as well. That is the representative on that board. Just do it as a team. And then in the end, everybody can win. That's how we do it here, Tyler. And I think that's something that if we can just look at it in a team spirit, we can all win. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is definitely a team effort. That's something we're absolutely going to talk about a little bit more too. It is super important that everyone's working together. Again, that's that council part, right? That's what that means. It isn't one person, it is a group of people. Another thing that's really important to remember, and I think sometimes gets lost a little bit, SILCs are autonomous. They are their own thing. They work with the government. They're not part of the government, right? So even though they might be saying, hey, here's what we got to do, that's not a legal thing. There's some legal backing behind it, but they're not, you know, it's not, you know, the governor or a senator or someone like that saying it. It's also, they also work with SILs, but they're not an extension of the SILs. They are their very own thing. And that's really important. And sometimes I think that's where things get hung up, is this sort of tension between, well, you're your own thing, but you're also telling us what things are supposed to be being done. It's kind of a weird position that SILCs are in, but it's really important, and it's how we move things along. Without that autonomy, SILCs can't function the way that they need to, right? There are 56 SILCs in the United States. There might be some in other countries, but in the US, it covers all 50 states and in the 5 permanently inhabited territories of the United States and the District of Columbia. Each SILC functions a little differently, but we all kind of have the same goal. We're all trying to work toward making, life easier for folks with disabilities, to help them be more independent in the way that they choose. And that choice part is really important too. SILCs are authorized by the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. So it's written in the law that we exist. It's not just some kind of thing that it is a thing that a couple of states came up with, but then later the government went, hey, you know what? Let's give them some power. Let's give them a little bit of force. Let's make sure that these are something that actually have some kind of say in the IL movement in each state. And some of that was changed a little bit. And this autonomy bit, for example, got really important after WIOA, the Workforce Innovations and Opportunities Act, which was passed in 2015. So I'm gonna take a pause here and ask if there are any questions so far, because I know I'm burning through all this stuff real quick.
Hey, Tyler, while we're there, I apologize.
Yeah.
There may be some people that are blind or visually impaired, and I didn't give my description. So I'd like to do that this time. I just
I
thought
did
about that.
too. I'm sorry.
I know it. So y'all forgive us. We're just, you know, having a good time and want you to as well. Again, Dr. Franche Anderson. I'm a brown skin, Black woman. I have dark brown hair. I'm wearing red earrings and a black blouse. So.
And I'm Tyler Wilcox. I am a white-skinned man with kind of longish brown hair and a big bushy beard and brown eyes and glasses. And I'm wearing kind of a red top and sitting in a gaming chair and a huge gaming rig behind me that's flashing lights, which is only important because I'm a geek and I'm trying to identify as such.
Thank you both for doing that. So this is one point in time that if folks have any questions or comments, please go ahead and use the Q&A feature and I will read those out and our panelists will respond. So we'll give it just a moment, see if anything pops up. I'm not seeing any burning questions, so I'll just share if it's okay real quick. I just went from being an employee of a statewide independent living council in Arizona for 9 years to being a council member. So it's quite a transition, and it's really kind of cool to be on the other side of things. But I guess who would ever want to be on a silk? Me.
Cool, good answer. And thank you, Billy. Yeah, so who would want to be on the silk? Who is sort of the next thing we're gonna kind of look at. The first thing to remember, and this is true of IL across the board, consumer direction is the most important thing. IL is all about consumer control. Remember that the thing we say all the time, nothing about us without us. It's written that a majority, at least 51% of the SILC members have to be persons with disabilities. And that applies to the, it doesn't necessarily apply to the staff, but I will say that a lot of the staff of SILCs are persons with disabilities. I'm a person with disability. I'm not some professional chatting at you. I'm a person with disability speaking with you. And that's super important. And this goes back to this whole thing about our autonomy and why we need to be a little bit separate. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go to this one because SILCs don't want too much interference. Majority of the council must be persons who do not work for a state agency, and a majority must be people who do not work at a SIL. This is all about that autonomy that I was talking about before. So we want persons with disabilities, and what we don't want is most of our people to be people from SILs or from the government, because what ends up happening is when we're voting on stuff, which is what we do as a council, if we have too many people who are from the SILs or from the state, it's no longer people with disabilities saying what's going on. It's people who are employed, or people who are employed by the SILs, or people who represent the SILs, or people who represent the government telling us what to do. We don't want that. We want just regular people letting us know what's going on. The governor appoints new SILC members, but they have to get recommendations from their SILC. So even though they're saying, hey, this is a person, I'm going to appoint them to the SILC, the SILC gets to say, hey, we found someone. We think this person would be great. We want to add them to our group. Now, I will say, depending on the state that you're in, the way that this works can be a little bit different. And I'm not here to talk about that today. But I will say that if there are folks from one of those states where this doesn't work as well in practice as it should in theory, you have my sympathy. But in theory, this is how this is supposed to go. And that's, again, to help us maintain our autonomy, to keep us a group of people with disabilities talking about what we need, not a bunch of people telling us what we need. Statewide-ness is also a thing. I mean, it's in the name, statewide, right? And that is the word that we use, seriously. It's made up. I had to fight with the spell checker to get this not have the red underlines under it, because it's not really a word, but it's what we say. We're trying to get people from all over the state to join up. So people from tiny town with a population of 1, or Giantburg with a population of 1 million, or people from Middle Place that has 50,000 people, people from the middle of absolutely nowhere, or people who are in the middle of everything. We want everyone, because we're responsible for the entire state. And without having people from all over the state, we can't really do a good job of saying this is what the state needs, right? We need to hear the voices from both the rural parts of the town and the big city parts, because both of them are going to have different needs. Equity and diversity and inclusion are huge. There's been a lot of talk about it, and I think it's good. And I think there needs to be more talk until we get it sorted. And we might never get it sorted. So we're going to have to keep talking about it, and that's great. We should be. We need as many voices to be heard as possible. And that means we want to hear from literally everyone. That's not a figurative literally. That is a literal literally. We want to hear from people with different socioeconomic backgrounds, different education levels, different employment, different racial and ethnic identities, different sexual orientations, different gender identities, different education levels, different ages. I could go on and on and on. This isn't just about race and ethnicity. This isn't just about color. This is about everyone. We want everyone at the table to the greatest extent we possibly can. And that absolutely includes as many disabilities as possible. That means, and I'm including mental health disabilities, substance use disabilities, people who have neurodivergent disabilities like myself. We want everything. Granted, every council is going to have a limit as to how many people can be on there. So sometimes people have to double up and represent more than one thing at a time. But everyone needs something a little different. And we want to make sure that our states are as accessible for as many people as possible. Only way we're ever going to do that effectively is to get everyone on board. And I think Dr. French wanted to add to this as well.
Now you've summed it up, Tyler. I mean, I'm just here to support you. Yeah, seriously, but diversity, equity, and inclusion is important in all things that we do, especially when that employment piece, and just people with disabilities being at the table. Again, nothing about us without us. It's very important. And it's not a cookie cutter. It can't be black and white. What's a fit for you is not a fit for me. They can't give us the same size box. It will not work. So just making sure that things are equitable across the board. So thank you.
Absolutely. And speaking of equity, I did forget to mention in my description, I have Tourette syndrome. So every so often I'm throwing up jazz hands and all kinds of crazy stuff. So those of you that are watching me and wondering, I'm really excited, but that's not what's going on. Those of you who can't see it now get to enjoy me having twitches as well. So move on to the next one. Here's the other thing that's really important. We don't want things to get stale, right? If you have the same person on the board over and over and over and over and over, they're not bringing anything new to the table. Nothing new is happening. SILC members can only serve 2 consecutive 3-year terms, and then they have to take a break from the council. Now, I will admit that in some states and some SILCs, that break is 1 day. And you do end up with a situation where someone's on the board for 15, 20 years. But that's not in the spirit of the law and what we want to happen. We want new people with new perspectives to come onto the board. We want the people who've been there for a while to mentor those folks and then step away and say, you know what? I did my time. I did what I could do in those 6 years. I'm going to let the next person take over. They're going to have different ideas. We want to keep that rolling, right? And on top of all of that, most of this is required by the Rehabilitation Act. And there are also some state laws that we might have to think about too. Needless to say, keeping track of all of this is a lot of work. So most SILCs will have at least one staff person, making sure the council has the right people, keeping them well trained, and keeping the folks active. And that's a big part of what I do. It's a big part of what Dr. Anderson does. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff besides, but that's a lot of what our job is, you know, herding cats and making sure everyone's doing what they need to do to keep things chugging along. Dr. Anderson, would you agree with me on that?
I would agree. It definitely is keeping track and doing the things that we do at a SILC. It takes a lot of work. We don't just sit and glorify a desk. And, you know, we got that state plan, that 704. We do a lot of things, and we want to make sure that people are aware of what independent living is, not just for the SILC, but just for the for the network. So
absolutely. So yeah, we're always hustling. Every last one of us. Getting us to sit still for like 2 minutes is next to impossible, I think. All of that being said, we love it when our SILC leadership, staff, board members take a part in our team. It makes the SILC stronger and lets us know what's going on at the centers. Now, I know that I said that we can only have 51% of or less than 51% of the board could be SILC people, but that doesn't mean you can't help out. That doesn't mean you can't say, hey, I want to hop onto this committee. That sounds really cool. Or, hey, I want to help you out with spill development. I have some consumers that I think might be a good fit for the SIL. there's a lot of stuff that you can do without necessarily being on the council that'll help us out a lot. But like I said, a lot of folks don't know what the heck we are in the first place. So I'm hoping that now you go, oh, hey, you know what? Maybe they do want to hear from us, because I assure you we do. We absolutely do, because y'all are doing all the boots to the ground work. We don't know what's going on out there. And if you can let us know, means that we can be more effective across the board. So this is probably a good spot for a question. And I think I see one popped up in the Q&A.
Yes, we do have one. So the question is there a limit to state council sizes?
Tyler, I
Yeah.
can take that if you want.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll take, I know that it for Arkansas and it may be for others, we can have up to 21. Right now ours is set at 15, but there are some silks that have less than that. But you got to make sure that that's in your bylaws. And if you have an executive order, like our silk has, it states 15. But the law, I believe, and I can be corrected by some of those that I see on here. I see Paula and some others, but it says up to 21. So that all depends. Again, it goes back to the state. And I don't know if Tyler has something to add to that.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you, Dr.
Yes.
Anderson, because your answer was better than what mine was going to be.
If there are other questions, please pop those into the Q&A now. And I'll just say that from the chat, Paula McElwee said, it goes back to your bylaws too, but that range is best. No number in the law or regs. And then someone asked a question, what is the actual role of a silk?
That was like the best segue ever. I could not have planned that, because the next slide that we're on says, what does the silk actually do? And I'm sorry, Dr. Anderson, I totally stepped on you. I just got super excited.
You're
Please
okay.
forgive me.
Do your hand motions. It's okay. It's okay.
That one was not a twitch.
Tyler and I both kind of had a conversation about, and you know, the things that I pride myself in, being a silk director for 10 years and now having a little bit more control over, of course, the state plan. The silk is the one that kind of guides that as it relates to writing the state plan with the Centers for Independent Living, with the network, with some information from the network. And we also, some states do it a little bit different. The 704 report, we get technical assistance from our DSC, but we have a part to write in the 704. And I've heard from other states, SILC, and they pretty much, you know, they do a lot of that themselves or with the input. So those are two main projects that the SILCs do. We also were at the table being a listening ear, bringing about awareness of what independent living is and who our centers are. And I always provide a guide and let them know where our centers are located, but that we're hoping to have conversation to maybe in the near future get more centers for independent living, because in my state, our centers only cover 25 of the 75 counties. So we have 50 counties that aren't even covered. So that's part of our conversation for the next spiel that we will write, but really hounding down on that. So those two main projects, there are SILCs that participate in other boards, local, state, and national, and they're at the table to just be a difference, to be a voice for independent living. Tyler, did you have anything to add?
No, I think that covers it. Excuse me, were there any other questions?
And before the questions, what I'd like to say, you guys might hear this and you'll hear from different people that speak it may be different from the way that Tyler and I speak it, but it's good to hear this information again and again till you can finally get it. We have some of our experts that do the trainings for us and help train your board and different things like that. And we're just excited that we have enough people on board to help us understand what SILCs do and what the Centers for Independent Living do. And we just want to continue to promote independent living in our states. I think it'll help all of us in the end. Thank you.
I'm not
Absolutely.
seeing any other questions, so I think we can keep moving on.
All right, brilliant. As Dr. Anderson said, SILCs have two primary responsibilities: writing the spill with the help of the SILs and making sure everything in the spill gets accomplished, or making changes when they can't be. This is super important stuff. This is sort of our bread and butter. We do a lot of other stuff besides, like, and I think I'm probably just going to repeat a bunch of stuff that Dr. Anderson said. That's okay. We have, but one of the things that's important to remember is we have meetings. We have to have at least quarterly meetings. Our meetings are open to the public, and people have to know beforehand when we're doing those meetings. That's important because I keep talking about that consumer control bit, right? That's how sometimes we get some of that information. Is we have in Wisconsin, every single meeting that we do has a public comment period. Doesn't matter if it's our executive committee, doesn't matter if it's our membership committee, doesn't matter if it's our regular quarterly board meeting. We will have a little bit of time for someone from the public to hop in and say, hey, here's something that I like that's going on. Here's something I don't like. We have a bunch of reports to submit. We got to do that PPR or the 704, just like the centers. And we work with a bunch of other groups to provide IL services that provide IL or similar or adjacent services. And sometimes they do stuff that we can't do as IL folks, and we'll talk to them. Do you want to add anything, Dr. Anderson?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Tyler.
All right. SILCs can choose to do other things too. So all that stuff I was talking about just now is written into the law. We have to do it. It's not just that we want, we want to, but it's not just that we want to, we have to. There is some stuff that we can say, hey, you know what? We'd also like to work with other SILs. We'd like to work with the SILs to coordinate with public and private entities to improve services. Or, if you want to read it, or the way to translate that is we want to work with other people to make sure persons with disabilities get what they need. We're also allowed to conduct resource development activities, and that means we can get more money for the SILC if we want to. We can do stuff that actually generates a little bit of income, so we have a little cushion. So we're not just relying on federal dollars, so that we can, do stuff that we might not otherwise be able to do because there are restrictions on how federal money gets used. And honestly, we're allowed to kind of do anything else as long as it helps improve independent living in the state. So SILCs have all kinds of different stuff that they're doing. And these are called authorities in the law. You don't really need to know that, but if you see something about, oh, this is SILC authority, this is what we're talking about. It's optional stuff. We don't have to do it, but we can say, hey, here's something we'd like to do. There's also some stuff we're just not allowed to do. We're not allowed to help consumers directly. So this is why it's so important that SIL staff have a part of this process, because we don't get to work with consumers at all, period. We're not allowed. If we do, we're in a lot of trouble. So we can't say, what's happening to Miss Joe down the street with her rant. We're not allowed to work with her. And we're not allowed to tell the SILs how to do it either. We're not allowed to manage those services. So we're not allowed to say, hey, here's what you got to do. No, I worked at a center. I could certainly provide some advice and say, hey, this might be a good idea, but I'm not allowed to do that as like a manager. I'm allowed to do it as a friend who's just helping out. So this is another good spot for questions. I know that part was kind of brief.
Tyler, I
My
want
apologies.
to add to give
Oh,
some
please
ideas.
do.
Yes, absolutely. I think, and Millie probably will tell, somebody said, what are some ideas? So I'll just use Arkansas for an example. Last year, we were very successful in securing a grant through our SMP, state Medicare program, that works against fraud against seniors. So I serve as a conduit to bring that awareness. And so we secured quite a little bit of grant and excited about it. And then we secured that same funding this year. And we just bring that awareness, help them put things out. And again, it's the educational part. And some of the ways that you can do that is maybe, just having that conversation with some of your programs there in your state. And there's some other ways. I don't know if we have questions, but we have been very successful to just promote the independent living and have conferences or summits that are board retreats and educational events. And individuals want to partner with us, like our state passes did, and where we were able to let people with disabilities and their families come to the event free. And this is through them being the sponsor for the event and just things like that. So, later we'll share our information. I'll be glad to have a conversation with someone and give them some ideas. Over the 10 years that I've been at my SILC, alone, I have secured over $60,000. I think that's pretty good once I started being able to resource develop it.
Awesome, thank you. So we do have a couple of questions, and Dr. Anderson just answered part of one, but I wanted to see if Tyler wanted to jump in here as well. So that question is, what are some ideas for generating funds? Did you have something you wanted to lend to that, Tyler?
This is something that I need to start working on with myself. I'll be totally frank. It's not something we've done a lot of. But what I will say is that even though SILCs cannot manage direct services, they can provide outreach. They can provide administrative tasks like keeping calendars. They can go to conferences and spread the word about IL, like Dr. Anderson said. So there's a lot of that behind the scenes work that we can do. And so sometimes when this is another reason why it's really important that SILs and SILCs get along. If there's a program where SILs are like, we need someone statewide to kind of oversee this, to kind of coordinate this program, and each of the centers are going to have our own. So I guess the one that comes to mind right now is some SILCs are getting into emergency management. So there's a person at the SILC who's going to the counties and talking about emergency management, talking to the state councils on emergency management. And that person is kind of coordinating with all of the centers to figure out what each of the centers need. The centers will have their own people doing the actual boots on the ground work, and they're being supervised by the center directors or someone at the center. So there's no supervision, but they are able to sort of provide kind of an umbrella assistance. And that's a good place to look for some of those things, because that's a place where you can all get together and say, hey, we're working on this project and we really need someone to go to the emergency EMS conference, right? And we don't have the capacity as SILs to send someone to that. Could you send one of your staff? And we'll let you take some of the grant money so that they have the resources to do that. And that's the kinds of things that SILCs are really good at, and kind of what we're supposed to be doing, right?
Awesome, thank you.
Sure. Were there some more questions?
There is one other question. So someone said they were late and wondered if we could define the difference between SIL and SILC.
Sure. So what I'll do is SILC is stands for Statewide Independent Living Center. Trying to define it would be a lot, but it's basically a council of folks with disabilities who work together to advance independent living in each state. Just really brief, because otherwise I'm repeating the whole rest of this presentation. Spill, again, we have a good segue. I don't know if there are other questions. I'll get to spill in just a second.
So I think it was SIL, so Center for Independent Living is what the question is. So the difference between a center and a SILC, I think, is what they're asking.
Okay. So the SIL is the actual center. That's where the stuff happens. That's where the consumers go. That's where the IL coordinators and all those programs get run. The SILC is a statewide council. So we just do our meetings and we work on this statewide plan, and we try to promote IL, but kind of, when I say statewide, I really mean like as an umbrella. We're not responsible for, the SILs have their little area that they're working in. That's really important, right? The SILC itself is responsible for the entire state as a whole. And again, we're not doing any of the boots on the ground work, right? We're just saying, all right, here's where IL is, here's where we want it to go. And that kind of brings me to this next slide, which was segued so greatly before. What is this spill thing anyways? All right.
So Tyler, before you get to that, can I say, when you say
sure.
statewide-ness, so that they can be clear, a lot of us have board members that represent different parts of the state. So we are statewide, meaning that we can go to all parts of our state. Whereas when I mentioned that our Centers for Independent Living cover 25 counties, they each are assigned certain counties. So the other counties are not covered per se by a Center for Independent Living, whereas the SILC has board members that live all over the state, different parts. And so we can go and bring about that education and that awareness. The centers are non-residential, and so are we. And some centers are Part B centers, some are Part C, that kind of thing. There may be in those centers that get both. So there's that difference as well. So just wanted to add that in there, but they are non-residential as it relates to helping those consumers. I will also say, I personally am not a person with a disability, but I'm a parent of a 33-year-old who is not only deaf, but she's autistic and had some other challenges. So I've been doing this work for 33 years. So I am not a person with a disability, and the SILC has people with disabilities, the board with disabilities, but the director in Arkansas, I'm not a person with a disability. So just to make that clear.
You know what, Dr. Anderson, I'm glad you said that, because it is important. When I talk about we want everyone represented, we want folks without disabilities represented
Parents,
as well.
yeah.
We want the parents, we want the advocates, we want teachers, whoever it is.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we do want to say nothing about us without us, but sometimes us is not necessarily me with my disability. Sometimes it's someone who's had to live it their whole life, like Dr. Anderson.
Yeah.
That's an important viewpoint too. And I think sometimes we get a little bit hung up on that. So thank you for checking me, because I needed that.
No problem. No, we're working together. Thank you.
Absolutely. I see one more thing in the chat.
Yes. So someone said that a SIL or a Center for Independent Living is locally and community-based, where a SILC, a statewide independent living council, represents the community of people who have disabilities statewide.
Perfect. Yes, thank you. That's exactly what we're getting at. So now I will move on to this thing called a spill. All right, what the heck am I talking about when I say that word? I am not talking about this. Picture on the left is milk spilled on the floor of a grocery store, I believe a store in Wisconsin. On the right is a bottle of water dripping onto a brick patio. And I was silly and didn't define it. So SPIL stands for Statewide Plan for Independent Living. The SPIL is kind of a roadmap. And here's a picture of a really old map. I want to say it's from 1538, maybe 1638. I think it doesn't matter that much. with point A and point B, and there's a wavy red line connecting the two. This is how I think about it anyways. It's like a roadmap. Basically, this bill helps guide independent living in your state by figuring out the SIL service areas. So those of you that are working at SILs, your service area, that's in this bill. That's where we come up with that. The SIL kind of has a little bit of ownership in saying, all right, this is how we're going to split things up. And we make sure this bill has the sort of make sure that as many persons as possible have access to a SIL. This bill shows the state how we're going to spend that Part B funding. And it sets goals to help persons with disabilities be as independent as possible. So this bill does a lot of different things. It is super important. The importance of this bill cannot be overstated. And that's, again, this is another reason why we want everyone to have kind of a say, tell us what's going on, because otherwise we're kind of awash in a sea of our own, perceptions and prejudices. We need to know what people are saying. Otherwise we have no idea, right? And the bill itself is a 3-year plan. We're currently in the 2023 spill cycle. There was an extent, and that does look like 3 years. That looks like 4 years, and that's because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm going to throw this next part over to Dr. Anderson because there's kind of a mistake on this slide, and she will explain why.
Well, Tyler, and that's because you had to get this in to April, but since then there is an extension of the current spill cycle that we all have been collecting surveys, the 2024-2026. Well, there will be an extension, and ACL will be sending out a notice on that. I don't think it's been sent yet. We just got that news. I do serve on the NASILC board. That's the National Statewide Independent Living Council. Kathy Cooper is our chair. I serve as secretary, so we are privy to have those monthly meetings with ACL, and it's really been a great experience. It's helped us. There are some things that we wouldn't even probably know that right now had we not have those meetings. So kudos to Kathy for her efforts of getting us those meetings when we became a 501c3. So just stay tuned. There will be an extension. Our spill would have been due June 30th, 2023, but now it'll be June 30th, 2024. And so there will be a change. So instead of the spill starting next fiscal year, which would have been 2024, it'll be 2025. Doesn't that sound funny? So anyway, just stay tuned, but keep doing your work. Keep collecting data and seeing what people's interest is. And I tell you, the more that you plant yourself in groups or with individuals, you'll find, I do in my state, that there's more and more people now finding out who we are. And my friend Deanne Hart, I think, is on here, and she's saying, SILCs and centers, and we do this in voting to build that network together. And that's what that spill is. It's my good book. Okay, I have 2 of them. One's a spill and the other one's is that BIBLE. So it's the good book. And if it's not in there, we can't do it. Well, so that's also important too. And you will probably hear this again. When you write your spill and you're sitting down with the Centers for Independent Living and the network, make sure the things that are in your spill you've agreed upon. If it's not in there, you can't, it's hard to fight something or justify something. And I can give you prime examples offline. Seriously, I've had some things that saved us because I can go right to the spill. So always make sure, but talk with your network when you start getting that spill together. Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you. That was some great points. All right.
And there is a quick question. I'm not sure if it's going to be addressed elsewhere. So if you don't mind, this might be a good time. Someone is asking who approves the spill once it's written.
We will be getting there.
Okay, great. Then hold that thought, everyone.
At least I think we will. And if not, I will address it but I think it's coming up. Let's see. So burn through, yeah. Okay, the next slide is where I kind of talk about approval. All right, so there are 9 major sections to this bill. I'm not going to go into each of all these. I don't want to get super technical, but just kind of a brief overview. The goals are section 1, goals, objectives, and activities. Section 2 is the scope, extent, and arrangement of services. That's that bit where we talk about where are the sales, what are the service areas, what does it look like? And that kind of feeds into section 3, which is the network of centers. So how is everything interrelated in your state? Section 4 is the designated state entity responsibility. So what are they doing? What is the government kind of responsible for? Because they have a part in this as well. Section 5 talks about the SILC itself. Who's on it? How many people are in it? What kinds of people are there? What does it look like? Section 6 is legal basis and certifications. That's about as dull and boring as it sounds. Section 7 is DSC assurances, and that's the government saying, okay, we're not going to do these things, or we are going to do these things. Section 8 is SILC assurances and indicators of minimal compliance. And that's where we're like, okay, here's what we're going to do to make sure all of this stuff that we're talking about in this document happens. And then section 9 is the signatures. And it is absolutely wild that there's a whole section for signatures. And this is where we get into who approves this bill. Because at the end of the day, ACL has to approve it, the Administration of Community Living. Before they will even look at it, the SILC chair, after the council has given them approval to do so, has to sign and say, yes, I agree to this. And what that means is the council literally has to sit down and say, we like this bill. We're going to say that, yes, it's okay for the chair to sign it, right? And then at least 51% of the state's SIL directors, and depending on the state, it could be a lot of the people, have to sign it as well. So we have to have buy-in from the SILs. It's not just that we want to work with you. In some ways, we kind of have to, because if we don't have a majority of the SILs saying, yeah, let's do it, we don't get to do it. We got to figure it out. And the DSC, the designated state entity, has to approve it. And then after we've all said, let's do it, this is great, let's rock and roll, excuse me, the feds have to look at it and say, yeah, this is cool, go ahead. Or they have to look at it and say, not sure about this bit here, we're going to send it back and you have to fix this. So a lot of people have to kind of approve it. It's not just one person. It is a series of people, and everyone has a little bit of buy-in, right? So that kind of begs the question, okay, who's in charge? The real answer, and where people get so hung up, is that nobody's in charge. That's really the short answer, right? IL should be a network. I think someone had just said that. IL should be a network. It isn't a hierarchy, right? SILs, they do the work of making people sure get what they need, right? They're on the ground. They're the ones doing the actual day-to-day work, interfacing with consumers, all of that kind of stuff. DSC is making sure money gets where it needs to go. They're also the ones who say, I don't know, you can check the Fed regulations. We're going to make sure that that's an approved expense. Now, they can't tell us necessarily, oh, you're not allowed to spend money on that thing. All they're allowed to say is, maybe check the law and make sure that you're allowed to do that according to the law, which is a very subtle difference. It's very nuanced, but it's important because the SILC is allowed to spend their money on pretty much whatever they want, as long as the federal regulations say that they're allowed to, right? The SILC designs this bill, make sure the state meets its goals, and all of the other things that we've been talking about. None of us are in charge, right? We're all supposed to be in this together. It's super important that we remember that, because otherwise this whole thing does not work the way it's supposed to, right? Like, and needless to say, it's huge. This is huge. It is a lot of work. This is why SILC directors, ACL, all those folks look like they're always run ragged, because we are. It's a lot of moving parts, and it's a lot of work to keep them all moving the same direction and going where they need to go. All right, so before we hit this last bit, do we have any more questions? I kind of jumped the gun on the slide, but that's okay.
So folks, we have about 10 minutes left, so this is a great time for some questions. If anyone has any, please pop those into the Q&A. Here comes one. Can you clarify that the DSC signs to acknowledge they are the fiscal agent, not actually approving the content of the spill? Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that is super important. I kind of glossed over that. Yeah, so when the DSC is signing it, what they're saying is that we know that we're kind of looking over the money stuff, right? They're not really allowed to interfere in any kind of way. They just kind of pass funds on and kind of keep track of where the funds are going. That's really all they're kind of allowed to do. In some states, the DSCs might be a little bit more active, but they're really not allowed to say you can or can't do anything. They could kind of say, you might want to think about that, but that's about the end of what they're allowed to say.
This is Melly. As someone who, was in executive level at a SILC for a really long time, I think they will try in some places. Arizona's not one of them. We've been fortunate, but they will try. And I just want to say that's a really great time if you're in that kind of a situation to reach out to the National Association of Statewide Independent Living Councils, because they, are folks who are in the mix and could be supportive in a situation like that. So I'm just putting in a plug for those folks.
Nice plug. I like it.
And Tyler, I know we just got a few minutes. I just want to add, some of you may or may not know, we have our TA assistants. ILRU will have a training October 19th. I think if you haven't signed up for it, it would be great. And it is for SILs, SILC, and DSCs, and they'll be talking about the relationships and the perspective roles. I believe that will be a great training, and it will probably solidify some of the questions that individuals have. And those trainers that will be conducting that will do a pretty thorough job of going through some of those for you. So remember that October 19th, that's a training through ILRU.
Awesome. Thank you. That was another good plug. Yeah, that was perfect. I'm gonna burn through the next couple of slides. Even if there are questions, there are a whole bunch left, so I want to make sure we get to the end and then we can open it up. All right, so I have bombarded y'all with a bunch of information. Why should you care? First of all, the spill guides how we make independent living stronger in each of our states, right? Super important document. We can't kind of progress without that spill telling us where to go and where we need to go. So helping out on that is probably one of the most important things you can do, if nothing else, right? Without everyone's perspective, we can't hope to see everyone's point of view. It sounds really silly to say it, but it's so true, right? I don't know what the world looks like from where Dr. Franche is sitting, and she absolutely doesn't know what the world looks like from where I'm sitting, right? We are very different people. Doesn't mean we don't love each other, but you know what? She's going to have a very different life experience than I did, and both of those are valuable and super important if we're going to make IL strong. You know what? And even if you have never noticed it, everything we do in IL, especially in our states, influences our spills and is guided by or is influenced. Or I'm sorry, I'll try it again. Everything we do is either guided by or influences our spill and ourselves, right? There is nothing that is not connected to them. And there's nothing we do is not connected to you all. It is super important to remember that. Again, nobody's in charge. No one's better or worse than anyone else. And if we remember that, if we all work together, we can make this happen. So, like I said, the most important thing to remember is the more people we can get involved, the stronger we can be. And I have a picture here of about 300 Amish men picking up a barn with their bare hands, a huge barn, with their bare hands and walking it along, right? And there's kind of a guy in charge, but he's not as important as the guys picking up that barn. I'm telling you, if they're not all working together, people are going to get hurt, right? It's going to be a bad day. So what can you do? First of all, read the spill. At the very least, read the goals and objectives, because there's a bunch of stuff in there, and this bill is a long, boring, obnoxious document. And I think we all hate reading it, as important as it is in some parts, because when you get to the financial tables, some of our eyes just glaze over. I know mine do. Like, it's important. I need to know that stuff. I have to go back over and over again because I can't keep it straight, right? Ask questions about it. If there's something in there you don't understand, say, hey, wait a minute, what does this mean? Because there's a lot of legally jargon and nonsense that we have to put in there because the government says we have to, right? You know, and we're working on it. Some of us are getting better. I will say a lot of us are getting better about making things plain language, but that hasn't always been the case. So holler at us, say, hey, I don't get this, right? Let us know that we're not writing it right. It's important. When there's public comment and feedback, provide it. Let us know. The more people we hear from, the more we can make sure we're doing the right things for our state. We're not going to know if y'all don't tell us. Get to know your SILC members and staff. We're all pretty nice people. We don't bite. Give me a holler. Give Dr. Anderson a holler. Say, hey, what's up? How's your day going? Right? I want to hear from you guys. I worked as an IL coordinator. I'm used to talking to everyone. You know, I don't want to feel like I'm sitting on an ivory tower. I'm not more important or less important than any of us. We're all people. I want to hear from everyone. Let me know what's going on. That's how we build this stuff up. Help with spill development. See if there's a place for you on the team, right? Maybe you can't join the SILC council. Maybe the SILC has too many people from SILs, or you're not in the right region. You know, if you hop onto one of those committees or you help with spill development, I'll tell you what, the next time that position rolls open and you want to join, they'll be like, oh yeah, hey, Bobby was sitting there. She definitely wants to join. Let's get her in on this, right? Like I said, join yourself, work with one of the committees, right? Plenty of ways to get involved. And last thing I'm going to leave you with, if you're not tired of me and you're not tired of Dr. Anderson yet, here is our contact information. And sweet, I got 3 minutes to spare. So
We do have a
open up those questions.
or a comment, I guess. So the person said, I apologize if this was said, but it's important to note that if there isn't a functioning SILC, the state will not receive any IL funding. That's why we need to collaborate with the SIL, or Centers for Independent Living, and the DSE, designated state entity, to create the SPIL, State Plan for Independent Living, to obtain the correct funding. Thank you for bringing that up. That is critical.
Yeah.
Either of you like to add to that?
Yeah, that's part of my spiel. That's part of my conversation when people want to know who we are. So, you know, in order for a SILC to exist, there's got to be, you know, if we don't exist, the state doesn't get certain dollars. What? You know, so it really sparks a conversation. So thank you, whoever brought that up. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it is super important. And I will admit that most of the stuff that I'm talking about here gets tied back to that, right? If things don't happen, there isn't funding. But there's also a small part of me that doesn't want that to be the takeaway. Yeah, it's important on a very, very programmatic level and a very, very legal level. These things are important. I don't want that to be the takeaway, though. I want you to be like, yeah, let's join up with these folks because they're making a difference, right? There's a bunch of stuff in IL, and I think we run into this problem all the time. Like, oh, here's the legal reason. Who cares, right? Let's meet the legal requirements for definite, but let's go beyond that. Let's figure out why that law is there in the first place. You know why that law is there? Is so that people listen to the SILC, so that when we write a spill, people don't just say, who are these guys? Like, I don't care about those people sitting up there in the Capitol. It doesn't matter. No, this is a way to say, no, you got to listen. This has to be a thing. This has to happen. All right, great. We have to happen. So let's do something about it. Let's own it. Let's be a part of something bigger than the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. Because the one thing that I've learned about laws, sorry, I'm getting soapboxy, but the one thing I've learned about laws is they're a great starting. The 88 is great as a starting. It is freaking terrible otherwise, right? It's a great place to start, but you know what? People need a lot more than what the ADA can ever hope to accomplish. Same thing with WIOA, same thing with the Rehab Act. I love that we have them in place, but it's the bottom rung. It is not the end all be all. So sorry, I got kind of
No.
hyper about that one.
Thanks for your soapbox, and those all sound like future conference sessions to me, but we are out of time for today. So I just want to thank our presenters, thank everyone both in front of the camera and behind for making this happen. Thanks to our ASL interpreter and our cart writer. We really appreciate you all being here, and we will close. Please complete your evaluation. We really do look at those and take those seriously for making things come together in the future. And if you're a youth, join the youth conference. And if not, see you tomorrow, bright and early, everyone. Thank you all
You
so
know what?
much.
Before we close, can I add one more real quick? I
Yes.
have the Discord open. I'm a geek, so I'm using it. So if anyone wants to chat on Discord, I do have that open. I'm going to keep it open for a while. So, you know, holler at me, tell me what I did wrong. Tell me, tell me
You
what
did-
things I missed.
You did
Um,
excellent, Tyler.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. And thank you all for attending. You made this amazing. So I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you all. Take care.